Hi Kirsten, a huge thank you for joining me today to talk a bit about a topic that I know you get asked about ever so often, which is all around how do I give my staff secure access to all of the files and applications that they need to work remotely?
It's a very good question, and one that's particularly pertinent at the moment. And you are right, we do get asked it an awful lot. And the way that nobody's actually in their offices anymore behind all their lovely security systems designed to make sure they're safe, yeah, it's something that people are realizing that they're going to have to address, as this new remote working does not seem to be going away anytime soon. So I suppose the first question to ask in this scenario would be, it's sort of what applications and data do your employees need to access? And that's, yeah, the first thing to kind of ask yourself when you sort of start to look at this is, what do we actually need? Because what you find a lot of the time is you'll go and you'll look at your server in the office and there'll be all sorts on there, the vast majority of which your employees don't actually need access to be able to do their sort of day-to-day jobs. So yeah, first sort of key thing is to sit there and actually make a plan of, right, this is what we need to access, and then you can go from there and work out how you do it. Otherwise, if you sort of go at it with an approach of, right, we need to be able to access everything, it becomes very expensive, very difficult, and very complicated. That's one of the things that we can help with.
Excellent. Okay, so once I've determined I need access to, I guess, email. I need access to probably my files, my PowerPoint documents, any Word documents, all that kind of stuff. What kind of products and services are people starting to look into now that they're all working around the country?
So the biggest one that I think we've seen, and it's been kind of a bit of a slow grower over the last sort of 5 to 10 years, is Microsoft 365. And they did that thing that Microsoft do, where they almost sort of get ahead of the market a little bit. So when Office 365 was first launched, it was viewed with a little bit of suspicion. And hang on a minute, what is this? This is completely new. And now, even outside of your traditional Office applications, so your email, your Word, your Excel, people are starting to find that when they go and look for something like a CRM system, an ERP system that's going to run their manufacturing, a payroll system, anything like that, people are looking at cloud applications first rather than having something sat on premise. So it's a lot easier in some ways for companies to be able to get people that access than it was a few years ago, because the big manufacturers, the Microsofts, the Salesforces, the SAPs, the Oracles, are sort of moving that way themselves, and they are starting to offer this. So that's sort of one way of doing it. And yeah, 365 will take you a long way towards getting where you need to be, because that can help you get your emails from anywhere. You can have your own sort of personal user files stored on there, as well as sort of collaborative shared ones. So if you think of it in kind of ye olden times, i.e. less than 10 years ago, you would have a shared drive on a server that everyone would sort of RDP onto to access those files to go and look at on the network. And then they'd have their personal files that they were working on in their My Documents folder. And what 365 does is take that shared drive and puts it into a program called SharePoint, which you can do a lot with SharePoint, but in its purest form, it's a document repository that you can use to sort of share and have multiple people collaborating on at the same time. So that then takes the place of your shared drive on your server. And then Microsoft OneDrive takes the place of your My Documents folder. And what that means is that those files are available from anywhere at any time. So if your user drops a laptop in a lake or whatever, you can still get their files. They're not lost. And if somebody wants to log in on their holiday, if they've got to borrow somebody's laptop, they can log in via a web portal and get everything they need to get.
Interesting point there, Kirsten. If I just jump on that then. So
Go for it.
you said that they're accessible anywhere, even from somebody else's laptop. Is that one of the reasons why people might be a little bit more reluctant towards going, to the cloud? Is there a security concern about accessing your files wherever?
Um, no more that there's a security concern accessing them from anywhere else. So when Office 365 was originally launched, there was a little bit of a misconception that that was all you needed. So people went from having their Exchange server in their office, and with that Exchange server, they'd have various bits of security software, they'd have redundancy built in, they'd have backup, they'd have email filtering to get rid of all those rubbish emails, trying to sell you things and all of that. And a lot of people moved to 365 and didn't take any of that sort of supporting infrastructure with them. And you absolutely do still need it, because you still need to, whereas Microsoft will go an awfully long way to making sure that that platform's available, you are still responsible for your data within it, and that's where the security concern is. So you've got to make absolutely sure that you can protect it. So what we do for our clients, we provide a managed service wrap around Office 365 and those cloud applications to make sure that it's backed up, to make sure that it's secure, and with things like emails, to make sure that you can still access them if and when Microsoft do have an outage, because it does happen. Nobody's perfect.
I mean, that's an interesting point that I think a lot of our customers have raised with us, actually, probably more so since the pandemic than beforehand, around some of those spammy emails. So, I mean, in terms of the cost of getting something in place to make sure they don't come through versus somebody clicking, you know, what are the outcomes if somebody clicks on a spam email these days? What happens?
What you see a lot of is ransomware, which is the ones where that's the one where it'll sort of fill your PC with rubbish, and you'll get a little message going, right, we're not going to let you back into this till you pay XYZ by however much money. And you look at the likes of certain companies, I won't mention names because I don't think that's fair, that they've actually been targeted by ransomware and they've actually paid the ransom and then had their license to trade revoked by the bodies that, because it's almost akin to negotiating with terrorists, I think. So that's one you get. Another one you see is phishing scams. Now, these are quite clever because there's nothing technically malicious, there's no viruses in the emails, but what you'll see is somebody slightly doctored an email address or a domain name to make it look like it's coming from someone else within the organization. So, for example, I had one a few weeks ago, and it was somebody pretending to be our CEO and asking for my mobile number so that he could ring me and tell me about something he wanted me to do, which I'm sure, had I given my mobile number, would have been go and send me some money from the corporate account, go and buy me some Amazon vouchers. And those you've really got to watch, because you can load up with all the antivirus and all the anti-malware you want, but at the end of the day, there's a stat, and I think it's something like 74% of data breaches were spotted by people rather than software. And something like phishing, that is primarily user education. So making people aware that this is the thing that happens, what to keep an eye out, check your domain names, that sort of thing, and just making sure people are on the alert.
I mean, surely software, you know, as a solution there would benefit in that less comes through. Is that a fair assumption?
Yeah, absolutely. The way I like to look at security, and the way I've kind of been taught over the however many years, we won't go into that, is that security is not a one and done. It used to be, to a certain point in the day, you'd speak to somebody and they'd go, yes, I've got a firewall and I've got my endpoint antivirus, my McAfee, my Symantec, whatever it is. I'm fine. Thank you very much. Off you go. What you see now is, because the attacks and the threat landscape is becoming so much more sophisticated, people are having to sort of adopt what we call a layered approach. So it's a case of, right, I've got my firewall. What happens if somebody gets through my firewall? Is that it? Is that they're in? And you need to have something behind that. So you can have sort of next generation antivirus that will go out and have actual machine learning built into it. So it will actually learn from the viruses and the attacks that it sees, and it will go out and sort of protect you from new ones. Penetration testing is really, really important. I know we don't like that word, but that's really, really important, to have somebody like actually come and try and get onto your network and see how far they get. That's sometimes really, really enlightening and quite frightening. in some ways. Then there's the user education piece, and then there is sort of some of our customers, the larger ones, will have dedicated security operation centres that are basically there monitoring the health of their systems all the time to make sure that nothing sort of goes wrong and there's nothing, they're not going to lose any data or anything like that. So it's security is a really, really big topic, and it's really important, but it's very easy to get. You almost can't see the wood for the trees because there is so much out there.
So I think that's quite an interesting point that you raised there, because as you say, larger businesses will probably have multi-layered approach. Yeah, I'm learning lots around their security, perhaps their IT, their office, their collaboration tools, etc. What about smaller businesses? You know, they might be sat there completely non-technical. They just want to run their business, do their do. How can they formulate a plan to protect their business and give their staff access to the files and the tools that they need?
So that's where we can help an awful lot. Our managed service wrap is deliberately designed for our smaller businesses and the guys that need a little bit of support and that haven't got never-ending budgets and CISOs to sit there and run this for them. So what we recommend as a bare minimum with Office 365 and workstations is we will say to our customers, right, we will provide you with your endpoint antivirus, and that's all cloud managed, so we can set up all the policies and everything for that. A virtual firewall, which again is there, it's like your bouncer at the end of the networks, it's there, right, who's coming in. And the other thing that we really, really strongly recommend is data backup for your 365, and that basically makes sure that whatever data you've got in there, you can always recover it if it's lost. And that really helps with things like GDPR compliance and all that stuff that even sort of our smaller customers are having to adhere to now. And because we've got sort of the relationships with the manufacturers, the security companies, we can kind of leverage those on behalf of our smaller customers and then offer that support.
That's good news. So it means that smaller businesses that perhaps don't have an IT person, or maybe they might have an IT guy or an IT person, they're still able to get that support and that help.
Exactly.
Okay, interesting. Okay, so perhaps I might just steer us round then. So we've got Office 365, and you did touch on SharePoint, and I think a big factor about my working life, I'm sure the same with yourself, is being able to collaborate with your team, your manager, your reports via SharePoint. I mean, that has saved me a ton of time and stress because I'm able to work on a presentation with 15 other people at a time. You know, what other benefits can Office 365 protected and backed up Office 365 offer small businesses?
I mean, that collaboration piece is really, really key. And that's kind of what we're a communications company. That is what we do. We enable people to communicate. So SharePoint is brilliant in terms of allowing more than one person to work on a document, a project, without them necessarily having to be in the same room, because sadly we can't be at the moment. Outside of that, you've obviously got OneDrive as well, but the thing that kind of brings it all together that's really key is Teams, which we are obviously using to communicate at the moment. And what Teams does is it effectively acts as a front end. Everybody out there's probably seen it or used it in some form or another. And it evolved from, we all remember MSN Messenger when we were teenagers and were sat there waiting for your mum to get off the phone so you could go and talk to the boy you fancied. And it's come an awfully long way. So what it effectively is now is a complete collaboration tool. So Teams plugs into SharePoint. So if you're sat on a call like this and we sit there and think, right, we need to have a look at this Excel document, you can go into Teams, it will pull it up from SharePoint, bring it up so you can have a look at it, and we can work on it while we're doing this. It provides all your sort of crawling, all that sort of thing. And yeah, it's really, really powerful thing.
In regards to some of our other partners, then, are these brand names that people will recognise? You know, people obviously recognise Microsoft. Do we have a load of different partnerships that people will recognise, or are they all high-tech companies that people don't know about?
This is the thing with IT, is there's a lot of companies that I would sit there and go, well, everybody's heard of them, and they haven't necessarily. So the likes of Datto, who we partner with for a lot of our backup and disaster recovery. I sit there and I think, well, everyone's heard of Datto because they're really big sort of in the IT channel that we kind of live in. But then you go out and you talk to customers who aren't necessarily particularly IT savvy and they haven't heard of them. So there's definitely sort of a little bit of almost an education piece to go with this of actually, do our customers know about this stuff? And part of our job is to make sure that they do and make sure that we're keeping them up to date with what's going on.
What would you say to customers that were perhaps fearful of moving to the cloud?
So it doesn't have to be, as we were saying earlier, a one and done. It's not a case of, right, one day I have everything on premise, then I have everything in the cloud. It's a bit of a journey that customers have to go on. And what you'll find is if somebody is sat there saying, I am very reluctant, I don't want to have anything in the cloud, and you kind of just sort of ask a few questions, and what you'll find out is that they are already consuming cloud services in some form or another, even if they haven't even realized it. So they'll have a payroll system, they'll have a HR portal that they'll log into, possibly some sort of in-house bespoke software, and they've already dipped their toe. And then from that point of view, it's kind of, right, what is the next step, and do it that way. Because really the cloud is a fancy word for somebody else's computer. That's all it is. So, and that's what we're here to do, is try and demystify some of that almost fear that people have of the unknown.
All right, I'm gonna go with a really hard-hitting question to kind of
Oh,
nearest the end then. Okay. Why Welcomm?
For actually the reasons we were saying before, we are not here to go out and sell huge security as a service contracts to 1,000 user businesses. We are here to make sure that that technology is available to the customers that we deal with on a day-to-day basis. So what we're doing is we're taking that knowledge and that information and we're making it accessible to our customer base. And I think that's really important.
Amazing. Well, that was perfectly articulated. Thank you so much for simplifying some of these technologies for us today. I know that our smaller business owners especially, I'm sure they'll appreciate a bit more insight into how they can give their people access to the tools and the files, of course, that they need to do their jobs. For any more information about any of the products and services that we've spoken about today, please do head to our brand new website, www.welcomm.co.uk. Additionally, for any questions or queries that you might have, please do forward them straight over to Kirsten at unifiedsales@welcomm.co.uk. She'll be able to get back to all of her fan mail shortly. For any more information, or if you just want to speak to somebody, our number is 0800 064 6464, and we'll be happy to get back to you or answer your call. Thanks so much. Check out more of these remote working checklist blogs coming in the next few weeks to help business owners tick off their remote working checklists.